Today, we're taking a look at President Clinton's first term in office. When William Jefferson Clinton was elected in 1992, he became the first Democrat to win the presidency in 12 years. President Clinton was born on August 19, 1946, making him the first baby boomer to reach the Oval Office. His father, William Jefferson Blythe, was killed in an auto accident several months before his mother, Virginia Cassidy Blythe, gave birth to the future president. He was raised in the home of his grandmother, Edith Cassidy, who taught him to become a very early reader. As a teenager, Bill excelled in school and showed a passion for politics. Under the mentoring of his high school principal, Clinton was sent to Washington, D.C. as one of 2 Arkansas delegates to Boys Nation, an imitation political convention that was sponsored by the American Legion. While there, the 17-year-old Clinton was captured in a historic photograph shaking hands with his political idol, President John F. Kennedy, in the White House Rose Garden. That July 1963 handshake later symbolized the continuity between the Kennedy 1960s and the Clinton 1990s. Ever since he was a child, Clinton's mother had told him that he would someday be president of the United States. The Kennedy handshake left Clinton determined to fulfill her prediction. In the 1992 presidential election, Democrat Bill Clinton challenged Republican and current President George H.W. Bush. Voters actually had a third choice, independent candidate Ross Perot, a billionaire from Texas. Some Republicans and independents voted for Ross Perot, who received 20% of the popular vote, but no votes at all from the Electoral College. As a result of this split in conservative votes, Bill Clinton easily captured the election and became the country's 42nd president. Bill Clinton had served as Arkansas's state governor for more than 10 years, and prior to that, he was the Attorney General of Arkansas from 1977 to 1979. Unlike George H.W. Bush, Clinton was young and charismatic. He was the 3rd youngest president in American history. Clinton had a folksy appeal and a lower-class background, whereas George H.W. Bush had a stiff public persona and had grown up in a wealthy family. These factors, combined with Bush's difficulty reconnecting with voters after breaking his promise not to raise taxes, propelled the Democratic candidate into the White House. Clinton first focused on the economy. He saw the massive federal deficit as the main source of the economy's weakness. It forced the government to borrow heavily, which helped drive up interest rates. Clinton believed that lowering interest rates would enable businesses and consumers to borrow more money for business investment and increased consumer spending, which then would promote growth. About half of all government spending went to entitlement programs like Social Security, Medicare, and veterans benefits. Those programs cannot be cut easily because so many people rely on them. Clinton's 1993 plan for reducing the deficit proposed raising taxes on middle and upper incomes and placing new taxes on gasoline, heating oil, and natural gas. Congressional Republicans refused to support the unpopular tax increases. Clinton pressured Democrats, however, and after many amendments, a modified version of the plan narrowly passed.
Government just isn't working for the hardworking families of America. We need fundamental change, not more of the same.
Clinton's first success was the Family Medical Leave Act. This law gave workers up to 12 weeks per year of unpaid leave for the birth or adoption of a child or for the illness of a family member. He also persuaded Congress to create the AmeriCorps program. This program puts students to work improving low-income housing, teaching children to read, and cleaning up the environment. AmeriCorps incorporated a program that John F. Kennedy had created. AmeriCorps volunteers earn a salary and are awarded a scholarship to continue their education. In September 1994, some 20,000 AmeriCorps volunteers began serving in more than 1,000 communities. Bill Clinton strongly endorsed new gun control laws. Despite opposition from many Republicans and the National Rifle Association, Congress passed a gun control law known as the Brady Bill. This bill established a waiting period and required a criminal background check before selling someone a handgun. The following year, Clinton introduced another bill to fund new prisons and add 100,000 more police officers. It also banned 19 kinds of assault weapons and funded crime prevention programs. During his campaign, Clinton had promised to reform the healthcare system. About 40 million Americans did not have health insurance.
Ensure quality, affordable health care for all. We're going to ask the rich to pay their fair share so the rest of America can finally get a break.
The president created a task force and appointed his wife, Hillary Rodham Clinton, to head it, which was an unprecedented role for a first lady. The task force developed a plan that put much of the burden of paying for the benefits on employers. Small business owners feared they could not afford it. The insurance industry and doctors' organizations mounted a nationwide advertising campaign to build public opposition to the plan. Republicans joined insurance companies in opposition, and even the Democrats weren't united behind the president. Some didn't think the bill went far enough, and others were afraid they would be voted out of office if they supported Clinton's plan. In the end, Clinton's plan died in Congress before it even came to a vote, and Democrats lost their majority in Congress anyway in 1994. It was not a good start to Clinton's presidency. In the 1994 midterm elections, congressional Republicans, led by Representative Newt Gingrich of Georgia, proposed the Contract with America. This program proposed changes including lower taxes, welfare reform, tougher anti-crime laws, and a balanced budget amendment. Republicans won a majority in both houses of Congress for the first time in 40 years. House Republicans quickly passed almost the entire program, but the Senate defeated several proposals, and the president vetoed others.
For so long, government has failed us, and one of its worst failures has been welfare. I have a plan to end welfare as we know it, to break the cycle of welfare dependency. We'll provide education, job training, and child care, but then those who are able must go to work, either in the private sector or in public service. I know it can work. In my state, we've moved 17,000 people from welfare rolls to payrolls. It's time to make welfare what it should be, a second chance, not a way of life.
In 1996, Clinton passed the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act, which completely overhauled the way Americans received welfare. Designed by the Republican Congress that took over in 1994, the bill created stricter requirements for receiving aid, as well as limits on how long the financial assistance would last. Bill Clinton's welfare reform bill is still controversial today. Supporters say that it gave impoverished Americans more incentive to work, and the unemployment rate did fall consistently after it was passed. On the other hand, critics point out that the bill didn't solve the problem behind poverty, which some consider to be low wages, and that its passage may have been racially motivated to some extent. In 1996, the common stereotype was that Black Americans were poor welfare recipients who were unwilling to work, when in reality, 2/3 of welfare recipients were white.
My fellow Americans, today I want to talk with you about our nation's military involvement in Somalia.
After the fall of the Soviet Union, the United States was unquestionably the most powerful country in the world. President Clinton decided to use the country's unchallenged power to resolve some of the violent conflicts breaking out all over the world. One of these conflicts was the Somali Civil War, a violent war for control of Somalia, a country on the east coast of Africa. The Civil War began in 1991 when Somalia's leaders were overthrown and the army was disbanded. As a result, there was no central government that had power in the country, and several groups began fighting for control. After 2 years, the United States was able to open Somalia's ports for foreign aid, and the country's warring factions seemed like they might be close to an agreement and could restore democracy. But there was one warlord that was holding out, Mohammed Aidid. His troops controlled Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. He had been ordering attacks on UN troops, hoping to drive them out of the country. President Clinton ordered the death or capture of Aidid, and that became the primary objective of Operation Gothic Serpent. On October 3, 1993, the situation escalated into the Battle of Mogadishu. American Special Forces were supposed to fly into Mogadishu on helicopters, raid one of Hadid's bases, and capture two of his top advisors, but the mission was a disaster. 2 helicopters were shot down, and the soldiers had to battle through the night to escape the city. Some Somalis celebrated the disaster. Here, a group of young Somalis chant anti-American slogans while sitting atop the burned-out hulk of a U.S. Black Hawk helicopter. Images of what happened afterwards are too graphic to show. Somali fighters took the bodies of 2 American soldiers and dragged them through the streets of Mogadishu. As images of the soldiers' treatment showed up in American newspapers and on nightly news programs, public opinion turned against American intervention in Somalia. Clinton knew his opponents in the next election would criticize him if a long war erupted, so he withdrew American support for the UN mission in Somalia, even though its mission was far from over. This is the crew of the Super 6-4 1 month before the Battle of Mogadishu. From the left, Win Mahuron, Tommy Field, Bill Cleveland, Ray Frank, and Mike Durant. Durant was the pilot of the helicopter, the second of 2 Black Hawk helicopters to crash during the Battle of Mogadishu. Durant and his crew of 3, Bill Cleveland, Ray Frank, and Tommy Field, were badly injured in the crash. The Somalis captured Durant, and they held him captive for 11 days. Durant is the sole American survivor of the battle. The United States also was concerned about mounting tensions in southeastern Europe. During the Cold War, Yugoslavia had been a nation of many ethnic groups under a strong communist government. In 1991, Yugoslavia began to split apart. In the new Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina, a civil war erupted among Orthodox Christian Serbs, Catholic Croatians, and Bosnian Muslims. The Serbs began what they called ethnic cleansing, the brutal expulsion of non-Serbs from their area. In some cases, Serbian troops slaughtered Bosnian Muslims instead of moving them. The Somalian and Bosnian wars happened because central leadership disappeared suddenly, leading to a rush to seize land and power in both countries. As the Civil War raged on, civilians were killed and uprooted from their homes, and an American and European coalition was sent to protect as many people as it could. The coalition in Bosnia tried to remain neutral and avoid influencing the outcome of the Civil War. Serbian leaders felt free to make a shocking and dramatic move in 1995. On their way to capture the Bosnian capital of Sarajevo, they massacred thousands of refugees in UN safe zones. In the town of Srebrenica, more than 8,000 Muslim civilians were executed and many others were tortured and raped as UN forces stood by and did nothing. Embarrassed by their lack of action and horrified by the massacre, both European leaders and President Clinton decided to move against Serbia. American planes bombarded Serbian forces with heavy airstrikes. The United States convinced its NATO allies to take military action. NATO warplanes attacked the Serbs in Bosnia, forcing them to negotiate. The Clinton administration arranged peace talks in Dayton, Ohio, where the participants signed a peace plan known as the Dayton Accords. In 1996, about 60,000 NATO troops entered Bosnia to enforce the plan. Not too long after, Bill Clinton announced that he was seeking a second term as president.